Hello, folks, and welcome to today's session on the accountability mandate, which is how we navigate the software supply chain in the AI era. I'm very excited to be joined today by the Director of Product at JFrog, Ronnie Belenitsky. Ronnie, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm excited about this conversation because I know that accountability when software is being developed is something that has been a hot topic in the software engineering world, especially as people are starting to use AI more and more in order to turbocharge the development efforts. There's always kind of been a need to make sure that the software pipeline is secure, so that we're writing good software and shipping good software, and not causing reliability issues or security problems, and that need has really intensified as we started to use AI as part of that process as an important tool in the developer tool chain. And so, one thing that I want to talk to you about, Ronnie, is how are enterprises that you are speaking to addressing that tension, that need for greater productivity that AI can promise, but also the need to protect the software that they're writing? Are you seeing that coming up much in your conversations with customers?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So we are talking with a lot of enterprises, and they are all mentioning the same problem. It seems like the world have actually solved the bottleneck that used to have on the development perspective. So they brought in a lot of different AI agents that are helping to write code. Even some of them are actually writing all of it by itself, and all is good. However, now becomes a new bottleneck. So now we have the governance bottlenecks that is now being introduced into those enterprises. And they're asking themselves, how can it be that I'm developing 10x better, faster? We have much more code coming through, but at the end, our velocity of the releases is not increasing, sometimes even decreasing. So that's a paradox that all of those organizations now are asking themselves. Now, more than that is the fact that they're now, up until today, they knew exactly who was writing the code, who was the owner. Now I
Yeah.
have another problems where AI agents are writing the code. Sometimes they don't even have any kind of mankind touching it in the middle. So organizations find themselves do not trust the end results of those AI agents that are writing the code. They need to double check what happened there to review by more than one person. So at the end, the bottleneck of the governance, not the fact that it's not solved, but is even amplified by the AI agents. So we see all of that happening and becoming more and more of an issue to all of our customers.
Yeah, we're seeing
Teams
similar
are,
stuff.
yeah, so teams are
Sorry, I
trying
cut you
to
off.
move fast. Teams are trying to move fast, but at the end, they're stuck. Okay, we're not delivering more. We're just writing much more code.
Yeah. No, we're seeing similar results as well. We actually did a developer survey that we launched in January, where we actually asked 1,000 questions, 1,000 developers questions about this. One of the things we learned is that there is a pretty widespread lack of complete trust in the code being generated by AI. Developers told us, I think 96% of developers told us that they have some level of doubt about the reliability and the functional correctness of the code being generated by AI. They also told us that only about 48% of them are always verifying the code. So that's kind of the gap you're talking about, right? There's this huge volume of code, this increasing volume of code that is being generated, by developers using AI. But there's still, we don't suddenly have more developers to check the code. It's the same number of developers that are available to check the code too, and something has to give. And that's where you get this gap where you're only able to verify some portion of it, right? And so this is certainly one of the areas where there's perhaps a gap in the expected velocity increase and the actual velocity increase that teams are seeing. Um, do you see that there's a difference in how much benefit teams can get from AI tools if they have some guardrails in place as opposed to teams that perhaps don't have those guardrails in place?
For sure. Because right now, teams that do not have any kind of guardrails at the end waste a lot of time by doing manual reviews, manual work that
Yeah.
eventually is stopping them from moving forward. Whereas the teams with guardrails actually know what is expected from them and what do they need to do in order to make sure that the code that is being written by them and their AI agents will be trusted at the end and will be shipped eventually to someone. Okay, so this is exactly what needs to be done, and this is something that is missing.
And are these guardrails often guardrails that the teams are imposing on themselves? I know there's some industries, for example, where there's actually some external guardrails get placed on them, right? For regulatory bodies.
Yeah, definitely. So those guardrails are coming from different levels. So we have different aspects of them as well. So we have the security perspective, we have the code quality perspective, which is again very important, and we have the compliance.
Yeah.
Now, all of that are coming from different levels, starting from the CISO, the GRC managers, the R&D managers, up to the teams themselves that also want to have those guardrails as soon as possible. They want to do shift left to those gates to have it as sooner rather than later, so they can actually know what is the problem ahead of time.
Tell me a little more about the CISO guardrails that might come in, because I know that there's often a tension between the security reviews that are done by the security team that is separate from the developer team, and the security reviews that the developers have to take on themselves, right?
Yeah. Most of the security eventually is being taken care of by the team, but the guardrails or the checklist that they need to follow, this is coming from more from the CISO and the AppSec team. So basically,
Yeah.
any kind of organization will say, okay, I have my minimal requirements. In order for you to actually ship something to production, you need to follow several rules. It can be as simple as you have not to have critical applicable CVs within your version. You have to have SBOM, for example, because they want to know exactly where is the origination of the code that you're
Yeah.
writing. And up until stuff like SALSA compliance, for example, as well, which is very important in a lot of cases. So meaning you have to have a provenance, okay? Some others are going much further and actually demand to have a proof of code scanning and then binary scanning and all of that. So you have to have an actual full audit trail of what your version actually went through in order to actually reach production.
And that audit trail becomes really important because you need to be able to demonstrate to regulatory bodies that you actually followed these steps, right? Are there some regulations in particular where these kinds of things are required?
Yeah, for sure. So you have the industries of the healthcare, the financial district, which are obviously the more regulated ones. But nowadays we have it also in a lot of other use cases as well. So as you know, now in Europe, we have the CRA regulation coming up starting at the end of this year, which is highly regulated and actually brings a lot of requirements from each company that develops software to meet
Right.
in order to sell within the European countries. And of course, in the US, we have other regulations like NIST as well, which is also the, let's say, the parallel one to the CRA, but on the States. And there are so many more. Each country has its own regulations, own frameworks, and it's a huge role. Okay, now to understand what you need to do and to actually differentiate between the different applications that you ship in different countries, this is one of the gaps that needs to be addressed while you're doing this kind of governance in automatic ways.
Yeah, we talk a lot about both NIST and CRA here at Sonar as well. Like CRA in particular, because I know we're a European company, but we have customers globally, and even customers who are not located in Europe but need to do business in Europe need to start thinking about the CRA. So I know we're going to get to the joint solution that JFrog and Sonar offers in a little bit, but I do want to spend a little time talking about how companies are trying to solve for these challenges even without a solution like that. Like, what is kind of the base level of adherence or processes that companies will try to put into place to try to deal with both internal guardrails or compliance imposed guardrails?
So the first step in this world for companies that we see is the fact that they are starting to collect evidence or attestations,
Yeah.
same word. So basically, any kind of integration that they have with any external vendor to do a security scan, to do a code quality scan, to create an SBOM, to do
Right.
end-to-end tests, etc. Any of that will actually require to create an evidence at the end of the process to make sure that we can actually save the full audit trail of what happened. That's the first thing. They're starting with collecting the evidence, making sure that they have this kind of a safe of a vault that has all of the evidence related to anything that went to production. The next step will be to actually add the guardrails. Now, the first guardrails that they will add is before the last stage, which is the production, which is the most important ones. And those people that we just talked about, the CISO, the VP-R&D, etc., they will be very interested in this gate. Later on, the teams will start having more and more policies on their side that will also be through the ship lab process that we just talked about. But that's
Yeah.
how we see these companies starting their journey in this world.
Seems like a lot of like disparate tools and manual processes that might be involved, in some of these cases, right? Where companies are trying to kind of stand up these guardrails from the ground. Is that what you run
Yeah.
into as well when you're talking to customers?
Yeah. So it's a lot of, first of all, it's a lot of scattered integrations that you need to do in order to actually collect all of this evidence. This is number one. Second, the choking point, the guardrails. Once you want to have it before production, you have multiple choking points because again, every company has so many different pipelines within their CI/CD that actually deploys to production. Every different application, every team might have a different pipeline. So that's multiple choking points that need to be taken care of. Now, this is another huge problem that those customers are facing. They need to actually make sure that they cover all of that, which is
Right.
not easy.
Yeah, that's a good transition, I think, to what Sonar and JFrog are working on together. I think there are probably quite a few members of the audience that are using Sonar and are probably using JFrog also may not be fully aware of what the integration between the two actually offers. Do you want to walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, as we all know, Sonar is the leading security perspective that actually does the code scanning and code coverage, code quality.
Mhm.
And on JFrog, this is the leading solution for saving your artifacts within Artifactory and managing the process of the binary from the moment it's born up until the moment you're releasing it to production. Combining
Right.
those two solutions together is actually leading us to have an automatic way of once the binary is being created and being stored within JFrog, we already have the full scanning reports and full cost coverage and the security scanning coming from Sonar attached as evidence and through the binary itself, which means that from that moment, the binary is starting to go through the journey of the release life cycles. We have already all of the data that was pushed by Sonar, and we can use it within the guardrails that the customer wants. So all of that is
Right.
being done fully automatically for the customer. He doesn't need to do any kind of integrations. Everything is put in place for him, and he can use that in order for him to make sure that it meets the criteria of their organization.
Yeah, that's a great overview. And I do want to kind of dive deeply into the different kinds of gates that are part of the joint solution. So Sonar has quality gates and JFrog, I believe, has policy gates. I want to kind of go into both of those in detail. The Sonar quality gate is basically the checkpoint that Sonar enforces for the quality scanning that we do, right? So Sonar Cube is scanning for reliability issues, for maintainability issues, and for security issues, as you said. There's also, as part of the security scanning, we can do software composition analysis. We can build an SBOM and those types of things. And then once all of those scans complete and we have the list of issues, we can decide whether or not the software can pass through the quality gate. And there's criteria that the customer can set based on whatever is required for that project or that organization to get through that quality gate. Now, what you're talking about in the storage of evidence, I think that is it's the quality gate result, right? Did you pass the quality gate or not? That is the first piece of evidence that, at least from Sonar, is stored by JFrog in this repository, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Uh,
and then surrounding
yeah.
that, there's also policy gates that JFrog implements, right? So do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So basically on JFrog side, you have policies around the binary, whereas you have a lot of different binaries that come together as a group and form a specific version of your application. Now,
Mhm.
within JFrog, the policies are actually making sure that all of the parts in this version actually meets the criteria. So for example, all of the different packages, all different binaries within my release will have a Sonar scan result that passed the Sonar quality gate on Sonar size, because Sonar will do it on the code level, and my version can contain multiple, let's say tens or even hundred of different binaries. Now, each one of them has to have this quality gate and much more. So on JFrog side, we are actually taking care of the binaries from the moment they're born up until the moment they are being released to production.
You've seen customers, I think, implement some of these, these these attestation repositories, and they collect this evidence. How is this evidence actually used by the customer? Who is using it? What are they using it for?
Okay, great. So this is being used as part of the policies. So the CISO is coming to the organization and says, okay, any kind of application that is now being labeled as customer facing or has a business criticality above high, for example, has to have
Mhm.
these minimal requirements. For example, it has to go through Sonar Quality Gate. It has to have an SBOM. It has to have a provenance to actually prove salsa. These are the examples, for example. Okay. Now, whereas other applications that are not business critical and maybe are even internal POCs or something like that, has to go through a completely different policy. They still have no critical CVs, for example, but we don't care about the SBOM, for example, or the code coverage, just for this example, okay? So the policies at the end on the policy engine within JFrog is using all of the evidence that were collected up until the moment this binary has coming to this gate and actually checking if this binary is meeting the requirement that is required from here. If yes, it has the green light to move on. If no, it will be blocked. And the customer, the developer, will actually understand what happened, what is missing from his side in order to meet the criteria.
What about the GRC office or the compliance office? Like, are they also having to report on these to external bodies sometimes if they have to if they're if they're an industry that's regulated, for example?
Yeah, indeed. So from the compliance perspective, we are translating those CRA NIST regulations into actually policies that the R&D teams need to follow. So for example,
Right.
in the CRA, you have to have um provenance data, and you have to have, for example, SBOM, no
Right.
CVEs, and you have to have end-to-end tests, for example. All of these are being translated to different evidence that we're collecting from different vendor that the customer is using. So in order to actually make sure that your application will go to production, the team needs to make sure that they bring all of these attestations at the right moment in time in the life cycle. Without that, they won't be able to actually release at the end. So they know what is expected from them, and they're bringing all of that. Now, later on, once the auditor is coming into play and coming to the company next and says, okay, please prove to me that you have a separation of duties between the reviewer and the committer, for example, you have the full audit trail within JFrog. All of the evidence you collected is always stored there, and you can always query for that and make sure that you have actually followed the rules.
That makes sense. From the SAR perspective, I'll also add to that we also have reporting built into the platform that allows you to pull up like a report that allows you to see if you're compliant with NIST guidelines or CRA guidelines or OASP guidelines, things like that. And so you actually get those reports, you can download them, you can share them. There's also dashboards available in the product. And I imagine a lot of that is also getting packaged up and stored in your repository as well, right? The App Trust repository for JFrog, so that you can have everything kind of stored in one place. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about outcomes and whether you've heard. I know you probably can't name customers, but if there's specific stories that you've seen or even just aggregated stats that you can share, I'll tell you from the Sonar side, we have seen evidence that using at least the Sonar part as part of the guardrail regime that a customer implements, it actually does lead to better outcomes when they're using AI to write code. They get 24% lower vulnerability rates. They get 12% higher code quality. 18% lower rework and patch costs when they're using SonarQube as part of their pipeline. I imagine there's also evidence collection that plays into that. I'm wondering if you have any kind of proof points from the JFrog side.
Yeah, I have come several. So one large enterprise that is a customer of us talked to us and said, listen, we were spending between $5 and $6 million annually paying
Hmm.
people to do manual auditing, gathering the evidence, making sure that we have everything, doing it across more than 100 regulated applications that this company has. Now,
Right.
with JFrog and the evidence collection and app trust, we save all of that because everything is being done continuously, automatically, without anybody to intervene. So that's just one example. A different example will be around, we had a global software company that spends weeks and weeks on manually generating a 400-page compliance PDF every year for their auditors using spreadsheets and to actually prove that they're meeting the regulations. Now, we said now that we are shifting to do it fully automatically, this is all being redundant. So we see a huge save on from our customers' perspective once they're moving to the continuous governance mindset that we are promoting here and saying, okay, listen, you do not need to do all of this manual work. You do not need to have all of these choking points being taken care of by you guys. We are doing it all as part of the platform.
That's super interesting and important, I think, especially in today's world, because we kind of know that manual work doesn't scale, right? And so as we add more pressure on the software development pipeline, as we create more code using AI, all of that has to go through these governance checkpoints. And if you can add automation, as you're talking about, as we're talking about, that kind of removes the burdens of the compliance checkpoints, the bottlenecks, the choke points, and allows you to take full advantage of the productivity benefits that AI could offer without risking an outage or a security problem or anything like that. So it's super exciting to see what the customers are able to accomplish. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens as 2026 and 27 develop, because there's going to be even more technology changes in the future, I'm sure. Ronnie, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did as well.
Thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who are still with us, there's plenty of more sessions on the docket. Please take a look at the agenda. And there's also some areas where you can collect and ask questions if you'd like as well. Thank you very much and have a good day.